Good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting, special meeting of the Planning Commission for the town of Hilton Head Island to order. I ask that you all stand with me and pledge to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Karen, are we in compliance with the freedom of mid-pray?
Yes, sir, we are.
Thank you so much. Would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Mr. D'Arienzo?
Here.
Your hands I don't see. Mr. Lobau?
Here.
Mr. Mueller? No. Ms. Whaley? Mr. O'Neill?
Here.
Mr. Sebald?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Time for approval of the agenda. First of all, does staff have any changes to this agenda today?
No, sir.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Loba,
Second.
second by Vice Chair O'Neill. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Unanimous? 5-0. Unfinished business, we have none. The new business, which is the primary purpose for us being here today, is to participate in a board training on the land management ordinance and our plan. And we welcome other members from other boards and commissions to our meeting today. Thanks for joining us. Missy, are you going to lead that effort?
Missy Lewick, Assistant Community Development Director for the record. And today's training is going to cover our plan, our comprehensive plan, and the town's plan. I have a couple of demonstrations that I'll make with what these documents are as we go through this presentation. At any time along the way, if you have questions, feel free to interrupt and we will questions as they come. So state law requires communities through the Planning Enabling Act to establish requirements for adoption of a comprehensive plan and to also accommodate a zoning ordinance. So a comprehensive plan, what is that? It's a long-term plan for development and growth or a blueprint for the overall community. And it has to be in place, specifically the land use element, before a community can adopt a zoning ordinance. So of course then we also have to have zoning in place, which is the regulatory component that really regulates all of the land uses within the community. So, so we get that from the State Enabling Act and our documents that we have. Our plan is our comprehensive plan. For the land management ordinance here. So this is our zoning ordinance. So state law says that we must have a 20-year plan for all South Carolina municipalities. It has to be rewritten every 10 years with updates every 5 years. It defines the process for the adoption of the comprehensive plan and also the components that have to be included within the plan, which are called elements, plan elements, and there are 9 required by the state. And then the town added a recreation element to our plan, and the most recent comprehensive plan for the town was adopted in 2020. So what does a comprehensive plan do? It's really the guiding document for everything that the town does. It provides policy and planning as a guiding document. It's very visionary. It identifies the direction of how the community should grow, address changes, guides progress. It's used by staff and by elected and appointed officials to guide policy direction and initiatives. We use the comprehensive plan to establish a strategic action plan. So This document is the town's strategic action plan, and this is an output from our plan. It's how we use our plan to then create an action plan for implementation. And this was adopted in 2021, and the current council is working on an updated strategic action plan.
You see, those strategic action plans are for 1 year at a time, is that right?
This was for, what was published was 2021 to 2022. We're still implementing this plan currently. So they will span several years, these strategic plans. So we also use the comprehensive plan, the Planning Commission does, when we review a rezoning request. The criteria that are required for a review of a rezoning are stem from criteria within your community's comprehensive plan. That's just one way. Organization-wide that we use the comprehensive plan. I think you'll see when we start talking about the growth management strategy for the town, including the growth framework project and district planning, how our plan is always the root of where we start as far as it provides that high-level vision and direction to then drill down further from there. And so that's another example of how our plan guides our policy direction for the town. So how was this document created is part of what I wanted to cover today as well. Certainly it was a large community-wide effort to go through this community-wide comprehensive planning process. It started with a process called Our Future. It was the vision plan process that started, it was in 2017 and 18. And that vision plan was adopted in May of 2018. It included the vision as well as 7 strategic pillars, and those pillars carried through the creation of our plan. Our plan that process began in 2019 and was approved in 2020. And I'll go through the structure of this document, but it combined the state required plan elements into our strategic pillar categories. So that's how we met the requirements that are governed by the State Enabling Act. So here you can see the 9 required state required elements, those plan elements. So you have to include how you're going to address cultural resources, natural resources, population, housing, facilities, economic development, land use, transportation. So those are required. And then our plan also includes those 7 strategic pillars. And so the plan threaded throughout has these themes, these pillar themes. So it's the relentless pursuit of excellence, environmental sustainability, revitalizing and modernizing our economy, fostering an inclusive and multidimensional community, building a connected and collaborative community fabric, expanding to embrace integrated regional focus, and innovative approach to right-sized infrastructure are those strategic pillars that are included in our plan. So the plan itself has 5 main sections. The first section, the purpose and process, really goes over, there's an introductory statement of the planning process. It goes through that visioning section of kind of the process that took place in 2017 and 18. And then it covers really our organization of the document as a whole, how we maintain our plan going forward, and then the process that we went through to go through plan review and ultimately to approval. So it really starts with the high-level organization of how we got from A to B in adoption. And in section 2 is about our community, and that has a wealth of information about, there's a really in-depth timeline that's included about our history and goes through some pretty detailed cultural resource inventory that includes information about our Gullah community, our historic sites, our historic cemeteries, our historic neighborhoods. It includes locations of our arts, culture, and other venues. And then also includes in the community section, even written in Spanish first, information about our island's Hispanic community, and then second translates that into English. And then there's a robust section on natural resources, as well as pretty in-depth analysis of population, housing, our community facilities, economic development, land use, and transportation. So that section 2 has a lot of the base level data of where we are at the time of this plan's production and where we anticipate that we would be headed within the 20-year time span of this plan. So there's a lot of really great information in there if you haven't looked at that section before. But it's a pretty comprehensive overview of the community, both from a historical context and then through some demographics. So the main sections really are in sections 3, 4, and 5. In section 3, it goes through the 7 core values, and section 4 is dedicated to Parks and Rec, and 5 is to our priority investment components. So section 3 overall has 7 chapters within it, and it includes the excellence, the environment, the economy, inclusive, connected, regional, and infrastructure chapters within it. And so section 3 is the largest section within the plan, and it has an enormous level of detail on high-level goals, tactics, and strategies to meet those objectives. Section 4, again, is the park and recreation element. It highlights both our existing parks and a pathway network, level of service analysis, gap analysis, park and facilities inventory, and has recommendations and goals, strategies and tactics for the parks. Same goes for that priority investment section. It covers large part of our capital project fund, capital improvement program, and the CIP program and its process. So that's all outlined there. That's really the broad overview of our plan, and I wanted to open it up to any questions about this document, how it's used by, especially the Planning Commission, as we're talking to you today, but how it's used organization-wide. If there are any questions, I can answer those.
Commissioners, any questions?
I have a question.
Really?
Hi, thanks again. So when you look through a document like this in the context of the Planning Commission or the Town Council, where in this document, or maybe it's somewhere else, is data or the discussion of the impact of tourism on the island? And, you know, one of the things I've always found difficult to get a handle on, and I think the short-term rental, initiative is getting a sense of sort of visitors through that lens, but hoteling and things like that, I never can find good data on that.
Some of it is covered in that Our Community section.
Okay.
Certainly, this is the high-level document. We could pick out in a follow-up, what areas within our plan address that for you.
That would be great,
And
yeah.
distribute that to the full Planning Commission.
And in the context, the reason I asked the question, you hear a lot of pressure from the community, the balance between visitors and residents. And a lot of those visitors are not just driven by the short-term rentals, but more of the commercial rentals.
Right.
And it's hard to understand what we're dealing with in terms of size and why it's creating that kind of noise.
Right. So you're looking for specifically the sections that cover what is our tourism economy overall and...
How do you get to that number?
Okay.
Where does that number come from? How often do you look at it? That kind of stuff?
Okay.
Other questions?
Yeah, so we'll be due for an update in 2025, correct?
Yes.
And between now and then, is there ongoing notations annually regarding changes and updates?
There certainly are, there are staff members who have dog-eared pages where there might be spelling mistakes and other things that when we do that 5-year review that we will fix. It's also a high probability that when we're done with this growth framework and district planning process, that we will be making some amendments to our plan, specifically to the land use element and possibly the addition of a future land use map to this document. So it is a document that is still living and breathing, and the Planning Enabling Act envisions that it is something that's looked at frequently by the community. That's why it has those intervals that we make sure that this still is an accurate guiding visionary document for the community. So yes, we do look at where we have areas for improvement within the plan. Certainly we would welcome that feedback from any of the commissions that serve the town. If you've noticed anything within this document that you have questions about or need more information on or think that it could be clarified, we certainly would welcome that.
That particular year, 2020, of course, the start of the pandemic, was a very unique and unusual situation. And with that behind us, there might be some dramatic changes coming our way.
Oba.
A question about documents themselves and how they relate to each other. So we have our plan, and then we have the LMO, and then there is zoning. How do those three things interact with each other?
I'm going to go through our land management ordinance, which is our zoning
Okay,
ordinance.
so those are kind of tied together?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
really, what you want to do is you want to make sure that your comprehensive plan is in alignment with your land management ordinance or your zoning. And that's also the process that we're going through with this LMO amendment project. We want to make sure that it is in alignment with our plan. And where we find that it might not be in alignment with the vision, goals, tactics, strategies of our plan, that's where through that 5-phased LMO amendment project, we want to make sure that we have the land management ordinance in alignment with our plan, which is our guiding document. So that's how they get tied together, and that's kind of the process that we're working through right now through that project.
Thank you.
So using Commissioner D'Arienzo's example of perhaps an amendment being offered sometime in the next couple of years, what's the process for reviewing those? I mean, would it come back before this group, or what are the?
Oh, yes. So the State Enabling Act does outline that process. It does go through the Planning Commission and through additional town approvals, yes.
Other questions? You ready to move on, Missy?
I think we might not need a whole hour. So next we have the Enabling Act that covers zoning. So we're required to have a zoning, or in our case, land management ordinance, that covers these main bullets. So to provide for adequate light, air, and open space, prevent overcrowding of land, avoid undue concentration of population, lessen congestion in the streets, facilitate convenient, attractive, harmonious communities, protect, preserve scenic, historic, ecologically sensitive areas, regulate density and distribution of populations and uses of building structures and land for various activities, to facilitate adequate provision or availability of transportation, police, fire protection, a lot of services such as water, sewage, schools, parks, recreational facilities, affordable housing, disaster evacuation, and other services. Also to secure safety from fire, flood, or other dangers, and to protect public welfare overall. So, and then the purpose of zoning really is that health, safety, welfare. Here it identifies that the zoning ordinance guides development in accordance with existing and future needs of the community, and to promote public health, safety, morals, convenience, order, appearance, prosperity, and general welfare. That's kind of the guiding state enabling legislation. And then we formulated our land management ordinance, this big book here, and it was latest, it's full adoption was in 2014. It's had amendments since then, and of course, you're well aware that we're working through several amendment sets in this calendar year. So overall, like the organization of this document is really two main parts. There's text and a map. The map is going to show up on the next slide I have here. The text is our regulatory language. So it sets forth our zoning districts, all of the uses that are permitted within those districts. There are general and specific standards, procedures for administration, how we review certain application types, how the code is enforced. The zoning map itself sets the boundaries of all of our zoning districts, and then all of the land within the town is classified into one of those base zoning districts. The document overall, we'll cover in another slide, its organization, so I'll go through that. Overall, the land management ordinance, the appeals and variances are handled by the Board of Zoning Appeals. So they're the body that would hear special exception cases, variances, and appeals of sections within this code. Of course, the Planning Commission is the body that reviews the policy language. So you're the recommending body that reviews amendments to this particular code. Here's our zoning map. And the zoning map overall has 6 residential zoning districts. The color looks off, but and there are 14 mixed use and business districts, and then 2 conservation and recreation districts. The color on the screen here of the PD1 planned development districts is like a cream. About 70% of the island is in the planned development district. About 30% of the island are in the other zoning districts. So, pointer. Okay. So I think you can kind of see where the planned development communities are, and then the other colorful areas are other zoning districts. So how is this code organized? This is the structure overall. There's chapters and appendices. And overall, the organization provisions that set the structure are in the general provisions and the administrative section. Administration section includes all of our application types and those processes overall. So that's where you're going to find the development review procedures, public notice requirements, public hearing requirements, and then application-specific processes. So it's where you would find the process for a text amendment to the LMO. It's where you'd find the process for the rezoning. It's where you'd find the process for a variance and whatnot. So that is included there. And then Chapter 3 are where all the zoning districts are located. And each district includes a purpose statement, the allowable principal uses, and some development form standards. So there are a district table for each district that are included up front. Also within Chapter 3, 16.3, it includes our overlay districts. So we have a number of overlays. There are 9 overlay districts that are currently on the books, and it outlines those specific provisions that are specific to those overlay areas. That's included in Chapter 3. And then when you go to Chapter 4, that's the use section. So that's the uses that are allowed townwide. There's a really large use table that if you printed it out, it would be really like a scroll. And it includes a table that shows all of the districts and all of the uses and whether they're permitted by right, whether they're permitted with use-specific conditions or by special exception. And then those that have use-specific conditions, This section outlines what those use-specific conditions are. Also, there are accessory uses that are allowed, and this section is where accessory uses and structures are identified and what districts those are allowed in, and what conditions apply to accessory uses. From there, Chapter 5 or Section 5 are where the development and design standards are, and that's largely where, like if we were looking at the aesthetics of development, we would go to this section as well as our natural resource protection section for some of those requirements. But this includes setbacks, buffers, streets, parking, and subdivision standards. All of that is in Section 5, 16.5. From there, you go to natural resources protection. In that section, there's wetland protection as well as tree protection and dune protection. And then Chapter 16.7 handles nonconformities. That is the section where if we have nonconforming structures or uses, this is the chapter that governs how we handle those cases. And we do have a number of nonconforming structures and site features and signs throughout the island. From there, it goes through enforcement, disaster recovery, and 1610 is a pretty large section of definitions that provide the structure and interpretation for all of the regulatory language. And then it's followed by a series of appendices. That kind of covers overall, the structure of the land management ordinance. These are on our website. This shows those links. You can find them on our site by either searching for land management ordinance or our plan. You can find our plan on our major initiatives page. The land management ordinance is found in several locations on our website. So are there any questions overall about the land management ordinance, its organization, how it's used? I can go through again. I know that we talked to the Planning Commission at our last meeting about the amendment process that we're going through, but really we're making, I guess on a high level too, if you had a rezoning that comes through you, it's both a map amendment. So if somebody wanted to rezone from, say, Sea Pines Commercial District to a community commercial district, that's a zoning map amendment. So you're changing sort of the color on the map, and that would come through this body. It would be a map amendment.
Yes, any questions here?
Missy, I'm interested in where we are in the LMO process that you're going through in terms of how far along are we and how much more do we have to go?
We are, the Planning Commission has gotten through phase 3. And phase 3 is currently had first reading at Town Council last night and will go for second reading at their next meeting. Phase 4 and 5 are forthcoming. We anticipate phase 4 to come to the Planning Commission for its public hearing at the special meeting that we're trying to secure a date for from you all. So we've polled you for a date in late May. And that's when we anticipate that we'll have phase 4 before you. We intend to bring that for introduction to the Planning Commission at your meeting on May 17. So we'll have a high-level overview of that amendment set and hope to introduce it and give the opportunity for questions from the Commission as well as the community. So then when we come back for a public hearing, we can address all those concerns. Phase 5 will be something that we'll be working on throughout the summer, but also it will incorporate those recommendations that come out of the district planning process. So phase 5 will come before the Planning Commission after the large growth management and district planning process wraps up. So those amendments are really part of the implementation component of those district plans.
So a lot of the work that we might have to do on that phase 5 will happen in the fall, probably?
It will likely be, it's late fall or even into 2024. And it's going to be a full overhaul of the code. So we are looking at, I don't know if it's a full rewrite, but it's a heavy edit. It will include changing the overall organization. We're going to look at every section, every chapter, every subsection for clarity, for user friendliness. You know, my book has a lot of tabs in it. I think we're going to add tabs so that everyone can have those user-friendly tabs to their code. And so it will both be a comprehensive edit of the current code and a complete overhaul. So it includes we are planning for it to include significant changes to our administrative procedures, to pull some of those out of the land management ordinance and into an applications manual. So we would have a separate book that would handle all of the town's application processes in one place. So there's quite a bit that would be included in that particular Phase 5 edit to the code.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner Whaley?
Just a quick question. I'm not familiar with the term overlay district, just general, you know, 1,000 foot.
Sure. So every property is in a base zoning district. However, they could also be in an overlay district, and then there are additional criteria and requirements that they also need to meet. So there are some areas like Forest Beach and Folly Field and Holiday Homes and others. There's an airport overlay where there are additional development criteria that have to be met that are in addition to the base zoning.
Questions? Is there more to the presentation, Missy?
No, but if there are any questions by those others in the room, I'd be happy to take those as well. But that includes...
Anybody else attending for the training purposes of this? Any questions of Missy? Okay. By the way, if you haven't signed up at the back of the room, your name and the commission or board that you represent, please do so before you leave, or otherwise you may not get credit for coming today, and you wouldn't want that to happen. So I thank you, Missy. That was very helpful. Thank you. I don't think there's any commission business that we need to do. We've got some coming up at our next meeting at 2 o'clock, and there's no chairs report, so I think we're ready to adjourn unless somebody has reason to not. Consider this meeting adjourned. Thank you. Karen, are we in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act?
Yes, sir, we are.
Call the roll, please.
Certainly. Mr. Darienzo?
Here?
Mr. Hens?
Here.
Mr. Lobau?
Here.
Ms. Whaley? Mr. O'Neill?
Here.
Mr. Sebald?
Here.
Mr. Mueller is attending via Teams, and Mr. Campbell is excused.
Thank you. Now, we're looking at the agenda for today's meeting. Does staff have any changes to propose? Then may I have a motion to approve the agenda as it appears here? Commissioner Hens moves. Commissioner Lobau seconds. All in favor, please raise your right hand. The first one, you've had a chance to review all of those, I'm sure, because they've been posted on the website for over a week now. First one is the special meeting of March 8th, 2023. Do I have a motion, Commissioner Hens, to approve? Oh, no.
I would,
Yes.
I have a change,
Yes.
proposed change.
Thank you.
It looks like I voted nay on the motion, but I believe that I was abstained from that for reason of not having enough information. So I'd like that to reflect an abstention. And then the next paragraph, I don't recall another motion having it sent to town council. I don't think I would have ever voted against sending one of our motions to town council that was majority approved. So I'd like to say that I voted in favor of that, but if that's not what the records show, obviously I'm okay with whatever. But
Mr. Hens, we'll correct that based on the video, and we can submit those at a later meeting.
thank you.
Now I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes as amended. Vice Chair O'Neill moves. Second. Commissioner Lobau seconds. All those in favor, raise the right hand. He wasn't at the meeting, so one abstention. Next, we'll do the same for the regular meeting of the Planning Commission for March 15th, 2023. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Commissioner Darienzo moves.
Second.
Commissioner Hens seconds. All in favor of those, approving those meetings, raise your hand. Another abstention from Commissioner Whaley. And lastly, the special meeting from March 29th, 2023. Do we have a motion to accept those minutes?
So moved.
Second. Darienzo, Commissioner Lobau seconds. All in favor of that motion? It's unanimous. Great, thank you. Appearance by citizens. Do we have anybody signed up to speak today, Karen?
Mr. Skip Hoagland had signed up to speak, but I do not see him here.
Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to address us during the public comment time? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to unfinished business, which there is none, and then on to new business, the first item of which would be to hear our annual traffic monitoring and evaluation report, and I think Mr. Shoemaker is going to give that to us. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Commission. It's a pleasure to appear back before you this evaluation report, a report that is a codified requirement of the town. Preparation and presentation is outlined in our codes. I understand that it'll be presentation, and I'll be as brief as possible.
Thank you. We appreciate the thoroughness of the report. It's, by my count, 93 pages long, and it's very thorough, and we appreciate that. But if we could have the highlights maybe and some conclusions that you've drawn from it, that would be very helpful.
There are 5 the weekday morning and afternoon turning movement counts at all of our signalized intersections, and a summary of 24-hour daily demand at strategic locations on our major arterial facilities, historical trends that enable comparisons with similar conditions 5 years ago, a description of the operating conditions at each of our signalized intersections and sometimes at Sea Circle relative to the adopted goals that are also outlined in the LMO. And the fifth requirement is recommendations to mitigate any deficiencies identified as a result of the operational analysis of the counts and conditions at all of our signalized intersections and Sea Circle. Recommendations to mitigate those deficiencies and bring those locations back into compliance with the goals that are also stated in the LMO. Those goals are on the bottom of your screen in yellow, and they are a average delay per, the goals are dual at our signalized intersections. And that is an average delay per vehicle of 55.0 seconds per less, on average, all the way around the intersection, and also an intersection volume to capacity ratio that is 90% or less of the intersection's theoretical capacity based on its geometrics and traffic demands at that intersection. There is also a goal outlined in the LMO for roundabouts, such as Sea Circle, and that goal is an average delay of 150 seconds per vehicle or less on each individual approach. I want to emphasize that the goals outlined for signalized intersections, the dual goals apply to the intersection as a whole, whereas the LMO goal for roundabouts is applied to each individual approach. Every year, we undertake the traffic counts that are necessary to show to you in this report and conduct the operational analysis that produces results that are compared with our operational goals in the LMO. All of our signalized intersections get counted, a turning movement counts for each individual turning movement on a typical weekday, not Monday or Friday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And the peak volume hour is isolated out of that count, and the analysis is conducted on those demands. And let me just say that the analysis that is conducted, that is reflected in this report, it goes further and isolates the peak 15-minute period, volume period, and bases the analysis on that. So otherwise, we would be entering in our peak volume hours and just assuming that everything is smoothly spread out within that peak hour and that we have the same conditions throughout that peak hour. Obviously, that's not the case, and the analysis takes that into account. Our codes require that Sea Circle be counted and analyzed in years that are calendar years that are evenly divisible by 5. 7 or 8 years ago, maybe around 2018, there was an increased level of interest in the performance and results at Sea Circle, and it was decided at staff level that in addition to the codified requirement that Sea Circle be counted every 5 years, we were also going to count it and analyze it in every even year. Ergo, Sea Circle is counted and analyzed in this year's report, even though that goes above and beyond the LMO codified requirement for analyzing Sea Circle. And we also take machine counts at strategic locations on our major arterials. We put them out there before Tuesday, on Monday. We pick them up on Friday. We average the 24-hour counts for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and those averages are reflected in this report. All of the turning movement counts are summarized in Appendix A, and you'll note that the volume demand for each movement at the intersection is shown on there. And please be aware that the left turn demands shown also include the infrequent U-turn movements. The analysis combines U-turns with left turns for the purpose of analysis, and they are combined on the diagrams in Appendix A, but we do have separate U-turn and left turn numbers at all of our intersections. The numbers that you see in parentheses are the previous year's numbers that can be compared with the June 2022 numbers. This is a sample of the turning movement counts shown in Appendix A, and the numbers shown in parentheses are comparable numbers collected in June of 2021. The percentage change is shown for each individual movement, rounded to the nearest percent. The demands of the diagrams do not include a percentage change unless the movement, in instances where the movement failed to exceed 50 vehicles per hour. We don't want to count 4 last year and 10 this year and show you like a 250% increase for that movement. So very low volume movements do not include a percentage increase. Note that the intersection total and its comparable figure from the previous year are shown in the center of the diagram, along with a percentage change that is rounded to the nearest tenth of 1%. All off-street bike and ped crossing demand that was counted during the afternoon or morning peak hour is also reflected on these diagrams. And typically on-street bicycle movements are rather negligible, well under 10 per hour, but for the purposes of analysis, they have been combined with motor vehicle counts for the on-street movements shown on the diagrams. Lastly, William Hilton Parkway, a lot of our major arterials kind of corkscrew around the island. It's signed eastbound, but you're actually going west. For purposes of consistency, all of the turning movement diagrams for William Hilton Parkway show off island toward the mainland to the right and on island toward Sea Pine Circle to the left. The diagrams for Pope Avenue and Palmetto Bay Road show off island to the north and on island toward the beach at the bottom. The tube counts that we conduct on major arterials are summarized in Table 1 on page 9, and immediately it is evident that we see trends downward on William Hilton Parkway and an increase in the counts for the counts taken from Pope Avenue and Palmetto Bay Road. That is largely a result of the removal or the end of toll collections in June of 2021. You'll notice that the far right column in Table 1 on page 9 is the effective percentage change per year over the most recent 5 years. And based exclusively on the 72 hours of data at the strategic locations on our major arterials, our volumes in June of 2022 were down 2.7% from those that we counted last year in June of 21. But due to influences from the pandemic, the numbers that we counted last year in June 2021 reflected an increase of over 10% from June 2020. I would point out that the 2021 numbers that you see on here were the highest that we had ever counted. And the second highest numbers we've ever counted were 2005. 2021 actually displaced 2005 as the highest numbers that we had ever counted. But if you look at the effective rate of change based on these June numbers over the previous 5 years, they are increasing approximately 0.4% per year. Appendix B in your report is a map that you can use to identify the exact locations that the counts shown in Table 1 were taken at. So the map in Appendix B corresponds with the numbered count locations in Table 1 on page 9. Furthermore, SCDOT has a real-time count station on Jenkins Island, and that data is available in real time on a continuous basis online. So town staff has readily available access to that data. The SCDOT uses that real-time count station to develop a calendar year average. Table 2 on page 10 shows you SCDOT's calendar year average figure for traffic entering and leaving the island across Jenkins Island, an average for the calendar year. Please note that the most recent data in Table 2 is 2021. At the time that this report was prepared, the calendar year average figures for 2022 were not yet available. They have since been released, and the 2021 average that you see in Table 2 of 57,400 vehicles was unchanged in 2022. Note that based on the annual daily average demand, vehicles crossing Jenkins Island in both directions, that we have seen effectively a 1% increase per year over the previous 5 years and a 1.4% increase per year over the most recent 10 years. The intersection volume totals, all those diagrams in Appendix A, are summarized in Table 3 on pages 11 and 12. You'll note that there are total intersection volumes for June 2022, and they are compared with the same number for June 2021, along with a percentage decrease or increase. Again, the rather significant decreases along William Hilton Parkway are exaggerated or even more apparent in this diagram, since it only includes data 2021 and from June 2021 and June 2022. Overall, if you look just at volume demand during the morning peak hour, we were down nearly 13.5% from June 2021 and down nearly 10% for the afternoon peak hour from June 2021. Now, I just showed you that based on our 72 hours of counts conducted on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we were only down 2.7% from June 2021. So the takeaway is that our numbers were down when you look at all volumes throughout the day in June 2022 relative to last year. But when you look at the demand registered in the morning and afternoon peak hours, it was down a lot more, meaning the demand must have been much more evenly spread out throughout the day, and less of that demand occurring during the morning and afternoon peak hours. Table 4 on page 13 and 14 of the report is a similar comparison of bicycle and pedestrian crossing demands at all of our signalized intersections. You will note that in the lower right corner of the chart, that the total demand was 15% greater than in June 2021. However, that is a bit misleading. If you look at near the bottom of the table at the South Forest Beach pedestrian signal, that crossing demand, bike and ped at that signal, more than doubled. And that is what resulted in the 15% increase. If you ignore that very sharp increase crossing South Forest Beach Drive down at Caligny Beach Park, our numbers were actually down 4.5% from the previous year, not necessarily unlike our motor vehicle demand numbers being down a few percent from the previous year.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, we're going to hold questions to the end.
To accept the report and send it on to town council, I believe, is that right, Missy? What will our action be on this report today?
I have that on my final slide, if I may.
Thank you.
This is just an example of what a signalized intersection analysis looks like. These are not in your report, but they are on file in the engineering office for review. You'll note the intersection delay per vehicle goal figure is shown near the bottom of the analysis report, and the intersection volume to capacity ratio, the town's other operational goal, that result is shown written in hand in the bottom margin because the software no longer calculates that. Each analysis on the back of the analysis has a hand calculation that corresponds with what is written in the bottom margin on the front of the analysis. Those analyses are on file in the engineering office. Table 6 on page 16 summarizes the volume to capacity ratio results for the intersection and the delay per vehicle results for the intersection during the morning peak hour. Both results are shown in two adjacent columns for June 2022 as well as the previous June 2021, and the charts also include 2017 and 2012 results to enable comparisons with the comparable results from 5 years ago as well as 10 years ago. Non-compliant figures are shown in bold. You'll note that there are no figures on here that are bold-faced, meaning every intersection was fully compliant with both operational goals during the morning peak hour. Table 7 on page 17 shows the same results for the afternoon peak hour, and you'll note a number of figures on the top line. Squire Pope Road and Chamberlain Drive are bold-faced, reflecting non-compliant conditions that are non-compliant with the operational goals as outlined in the LMO. But once again this year, as has been the case every year since I believe 2018, Squire Pope Road was the only signalized intersection identified as being out of compliance with the codified goals in the LMO, and that is once again the case this year. And once again, I want to emphasize it was only out of compliance during the afternoon peak hour, not the morning peak hour. I'll address that here in a moment. As I indicated, we counted Sea Pine Circle again this year. Historically, we have found that it takes traffic, since there's only one way on and off the island on the north end, it takes traffic a while to filter down to Sea Pine Circle. We go out and count it during the traditional morning rush hour, and there's very little demand there. To make sure that we are covering the LMO requirement of identifying the morning peak hour and the afternoon peak hour, we also perform a midday count at Sea Pine Circle. And historically, we have typically found that volumes are up here during the afternoon peak hour and the midday lunchtime peak hour significantly lower during the morning peak hour. Analyses were also conducted in accordance with the Highway Capacity Manual methodology for Sea Pine Circle, and the average delay per vehicle, as long as it doesn't exceed 150 seconds per vehicle, On any of the 4 individual approaches, it is found to be compliant. The numbers for June 22, the analysis results based on the volumes recorded, do not show an average delay per vehicle exceeding 150 seconds on any of the 4 approaches. So in June 2022, similar to June of 2020, the previous analysis of Sea-Pine Circle, Sea-Pine Circle graded out fully compliant with the LMO operational goals. However, that was not the case during the previous analysis in June of 2018. The approach of Palmetto Bay Road did exhibit a delay exceeding the threshold outlined in the LMO back then. But in both 2020 and 2022, we have a Sea-Pine Circle intersection that's compliant with the LMO goals. I did want to point out that relative to our previous count of Sea-Pine Circle in 2020, when we again counted all 3 peak periods, morning, midday, and afternoon, all combined, the demand on Sea-Pine Circle was up 2.5% this year relative to the previous count in June 2020. However, that was aggregate. You'll note that morning peak demand was up over 10% in June of 2022 versus June 2020. The midday demand increased 4.5%, and the afternoon peak hour increased 3.5% from the previous count. This is what the analysis looks like for Sea-Pine Circle, and these delay per vehicle results that you see down here on this line. This is actually the analysis for the afternoon peak period, so that's where this figure in this table, in this column of Table 5 came from. We have a non-compliant intersection, as I indicated. Afternoon conditions at William Hilton Parkway and Squire Pope Road. There is a discussion in your report relative to recommendations toward mitigating this intersection. We expect that the intersection will be fully mitigated as part of the Beaufort County and SCDOT's upcoming entry corridor project, and the town is in the process of retaining an independent consultant to review all aspects of design associated with that and make recommendations to improve it further. Generally speaking, what is required to successfully mitigate the Squire Pope Road intersection is 3 lanes in each direction. Coming on Island, we have 3 through lanes that go through the intersection, and that's why the intersection grades out compliant during the morning peak hour because of the extra capacity that 3rd through lane affords. But there are only 2 through lanes going through the intersection in the afternoon peak hour. That's what generates the non-compliance in the afternoon. Some planned improvements that, in addition to the 3 lanes in each direction, that will largely mitigate this intersection and that are being planned within the major entry corridor improvement project are on Island double left turn lanes to turn on to Squire Pope Road. That will require merging the 2 lanes down to 1 some distance up Squire Pope Road when that is done. Double right turn lanes to serve Squire Pope Road, and the provision of an additional right turn lane in both directions of travel to turn right onto the side streets here, recognizing that the widening to 6 lane is going to supplant the existing right turn lanes that are there at this intersection today. Wrapping up, I'll just point out that you have Appendix C in your report. That is a summary of that real-time count station data that is available online at the SCDOT website, and it shows the demand every single day of the calendar year crossing Jenkins Island in both directions. and it includes some other interesting statistics, a la the average day per day of the week, average demand in each month, highest volume days of the year, and particularly high volume days are shaded on that spreadsheet that is Appendix C of your report. That summarizes the volume demand every single day of the calendar year, passing along US 278 on Jenkins Island. And Appendix D of your report is a Federal Highway Administration report that is released monthly. You have the June 2022 report in your in the traffic monitoring and evaluation report as Appendix D. And I would simply point out that for the Southeast region, that includes every state from Florida along the coast up to Delaware, and it also includes West Virginia. Total vehicle miles traveled relative to the previous year in June 2021 was down 1.4% for the region. If you look at just South Carolina, it was down 1.6%, and that is somewhat consistent with our report where we had the highest demands ever here on the island in June 2021, a 10% increase from the previous year, but saw an approximate 2.5% decrease this year. Planning Commission action. The LMO states that that the report is presented to the Planning Commission and will be simultaneously conveyed to Town Council. The LMO requires that the Planning Commission hold a public meeting to elicit public comments and give the opportunity to the public to review this report. Following that public comment period, the Planning Commission is directed in the codes to forward the report on to Town Council, which is kind of redundant since it already says Town Council gets the report at the same time that it's presented anyway, but the Planning Commission may provide its own supplementary remarks, recommendations to the report to Town Council. So I would suggest to you that the action required of the Commission is either to forward the report to Town Council without any supplementary remarks or to prepare a memorandum of supplementary remarks and recommendations to accompany the report to Town Council, and that is the action that is required of the Commission to make a decision to forward the report to Town Council with or without supplementary remarks and recommendations prepared by the Commission. That concludes my presentation, and I'll be pleased to take any questions.
What I'd like to do is to poll the commissioners individually before we open it up to public comment, and so if you'd stay there at the podium for us, Darren, that'd be great. We'll start with Commissioner D'Arienzo. Do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, thank you very much for that detailed report. We were told several months ago that there is a move afoot to develop some intelligent traffic signals throughout the island. Is that in progress, or has that been done yet?
That is under construction at present, and the intelligent aspect of the new coordinated system has not been activated yet, and it will be activated later this year. We are currently putting in the equipment, both with respect to the signal controllers and detection equipment. We are putting in detection equipment that incorporates video cameras and radar detection and thermal imaging cameras to passively detect pedestrians, even though the buttons are still going to be there to have and are still going to be active for folks to push. When the project is done, you will no longer need to press any buttons. The system will detect pedestrians and their progress across the crosswalk automatically. If somebody comes up and hits the button, and doesn't see any traffic coming and they leave, the system is automatically going to drop that call so that when the side street comes up, the walk signal's not on and isn't counting down, and you have a lot of people sitting there looking at red signals going, what is going on? So that's going to be a big feature of the system, the ability to drop pedestrian and bicyclist calls if they leave early to avoid generating additional delay to motorists. But we are in the process on the north end of the island right now, installing all the equipment in the cameras, the detection equipment that is going to replace all the wires, the in-pavement wires. They're all going to be superseded, meaning that during future resurfacing projects like we have going on the island right now, it's not going to grind up the wires, and the light's not going to be operating blind and just be sitting there with the arrow turned on and no vehicles there. That's all going to be accomplished by a very sophisticated radar spectrum detection that is mounted on the mast arm itself.
So would you expect the 2024 numbers to look dramatically different compared to this year? Delays and such?
We are anticipating a significant increase in the analysis results that are reported in Table 6 and 7 as a result of our adaptive traffic signal project. Yes, sir.
All right. The bicycle counts you showed, do those factor in the growing revolution with electric bicycles?
Obviously, the percentage of electric bicycles versus all bicycles has really increased dramatically here in the past couple of years. But as far as this report goes, it makes no distinction between traditional pedal cycles and e-bikes. They are also counted as bicyclists.
So that the large increases might be a result of e-bikes. More people riding than wouldn't have ridden prior.
Yeah. As I said, if you ignore the hawk signal down on South Forest Beach Drive, our bike and ped crossing numbers were actually down about 4% this year. But that is largely a result of the spike that we saw last year in June 2021 versus June 2020, largely a result of pandemic-induced trends. What we basically saw in 2020 was this huge increase in demand earlier in the year, but by the time that we did our June 2020 counts, that had largely rebounded. It had not rebounded all the way, however. So when we did the June 2021 counts and looked at those numbers, we saw this very large increase. But it wasn't just a result of the pandemic. We also counted the largest demands that we had ever counted as part of our annual counting effort this year. Not necessarily surprising, they were down a couple of percent from last year again.
One more question, if I may. So the problem area you brought up at Squire Pope Road, 78, and the eventual solution being the new Gateway project, which could be many years away. Is there a temporary solution that we're looking at to resolve some of those concerns?
Short answer is no, due to the expectation that I can advise that once again, as recently as last week, made some timing adjustments to both the Squire Pope signal and the Spanish Wells Road signal that favor both directions of William Hilton Parkway versus the side streets more than that they were previously favored. We already had it, obviously, the arterial very heavily favored, so there's a limit to how much that we could do. And the changes that were made certainly generated some concerns that it could generate some backups and maybe complaints regarding queues and delays in entering from the side streets. But we did make some timing adjustments and implemented them last week that will improve service to both directions of William Hilton Parkway during weekday morning and afternoon rush hours. Beyond signal timing changes, we don't have any significant improvements planned in the expectation that significant construction would not necessarily be cost beneficial at this time, since it all could get torn up and completely redesigned here with the project in the next couple of years.
Thank you very much.
Good. Commissioner Hens.
Yeah, thanks again. Your report is fascinating. I'd love to spend hours just kind of hearing your reasonings for why things are changing. I guess that's my first question is, do you have any interesting or main takeaways from summarizing all of what you get to see?
Well, I've already cited the fact of recent volume trends, whereas it's been a kind of a gradual increase, decrease, a rather consistent trend. Typically, over the past several years, that's not really been the case in this report, because if you look at the Federal Highway Administration report, that's Appendix D, you'll see some charts on there that show a fairly consistent increased trend, and then it looks like the patient had a bit of a heart issue there at the end. But I'll simply add that I indicated that bike and ped crossing demand was up 15% from previous year, largely as a result of crossing at that one location down on South Forest Beach Drive. If you ignore that, it actually came down a couple of percent, similar to motor vehicle demand. But if you were to go back and look at trends over the past 10, 15 years, we have bike and ped crossing demands today that are several times what we were counting, say, as recently. Again, indicative of the town's success at providing alternative transportation opportunities and making capital improvements in that regard.
Why we need to focus on, I don't know what you call them, smart roads or connective roads where more than just cars are using it. Plan for that, and I know we are. Regarding the pedestrian crossing, I think it's great that you're going to keep those buttons there, even though our system doesn't require it, just because people need that, probably that feel, that touch. But how come when you press those pedestrian buttons, the lights don't change automatically? Why would you have to wait? It always seems to me like I'm here and I'm pressing it and I want to cross. Why isn't it automatic? Is it because it's not looking at traffic? Because we don't do that yet.
Well, one good answer is that in advance of the signal changing, the pedestrian phases that are being served, they have to terminate and go through that countdown. And that countdown is often perceived as being inordinately long because of federal Americans with Disabilities Act's requirements that dictate that it has to be long enough to get someone in a wheelchair or an elderly person across the street. All of our side street crossings, basically every time that the main street gets a green signal, there's ample time to show a walk signal and give the countdown for folks to cross the side street. So that happens every single time. But if we gave that much green time to the side streets to get people across every single time, there'd be a lot of people sitting there with red signals for very long times. So that's what the buttons do. They basically take the minimum green time that is assigned to that side street, typically around 8 seconds, and it supplants that with a much longer green time that gives enough time to show a walk signal and provide the countdown. So the answer to your question is what the buttons do. That's basically all they do is activate the walk signal and that countdown, and it extends the side street green long enough to accommodate that. but it doesn't typically get you the walk signal any quicker. When you hit the button, it records that you're there, and it basically says, next time I was going to go green to the side street anyway, I'll go ahead and give you a walk signal to cross.
Well, thank you. My last thing is, in summary, all of our crossings are working within LMO requirements. They were last year, they are this year, things are fine, and all's good. However, of course, you always hear traffic's getting worse and worse, which apparently it's not. But if everything's going well, then the purpose for this new traffic monitoring system is just to take something that's meeting our requirements with LMO and just making it better.
That is correct. And it's our, all of our intersections, save for Squire Pope Road, graded out as being compliant. But simply being compliant with the LMO goals isn't necessarily satisfactory to the town. We feel that there are some very significant improvements that will result from our adaptive traffic signal project. Basically, all of the signals on the island are currently operating in a timing plan that may change several times over the course of the day, but it's a fixed schedule. It's going timing plan this between 7 and 9 a.m., and it does this between 9 and 12 p.m. based on the traffic conditions that are expected at that time. With the adaptive signal control, it's going to be monitoring where the traffic demands are in real time, continually making adjustments, and it's going to give our signal system some capabilities in addition to the ones that I've already described. It's going to give our signal system some abilities at being flexible. For instance, on Tuesday nights in Shelter Cove, when the fireworks are over and everybody's trying to get out of there, yes, we can schedule certain timing plans to accommodate that, and we do, but at the same time, we're not there monitoring where the traffic is every single second and continually tweaking and saying, okay, traffic is backed up down this street, we're going to give them extra time during this specific signal change, trying to clear that out. The adaptive system is going to give us that capability.
Commissioner Lobach.
I think that was a great report as well, and I just have some comments that are maybe unrelated but related. One, I think what Commissioner Hens was talking about the traffic and people feeling it gets worse. There's other things like accidents and aggressive driving that make the feel of the traffic much worse. And I think especially in the morning and afternoon coming on and off the island, my office looks right out at that. So I see the police cars and going by every time there's an accident, and I see what the result is. So accidents happening on the bridges definitely impacts the feel of the traffic congestion. And so looking at an accident report sometime about that happened on the island and what the percentages changes in that could be helpful too, even though it's kind of differently related. I was going to ask if when you're looking at these intersections, if you look at intersection blockages, and I'm talking specifically about Spanish Wells Road, the intersections gets blocked to where when you're on Wild Horse trying to cross or Spanish Wells trying to cross, you can't because, and this is particularly problematic at the end of the day. And personally, what I'd love to see is a flashing yellow do not block intersection that started with the countdown of the crosswalk, but people just completely block that intersection, and then the people waiting to cross can't cross because the intersection's completely blocked. So that might be something worth looking at. And then the last comment was the Cross Island, and I'm a sign guy, so I look at signs. The encouragement of folks to take the Cross Island, and I know there's all kinds of rules and regulations, and I don't have any suggestions on what to put, but I think looking at that sign that says Cross Island this way, some additional things could be put on that sign to encourage people the benefit of going the Cross Island versus going the other direction. And I think, the toll stuff was removed, And I don't think really a lot of new stuff was put up there to encourage people, if you're going here, take this. This is the fastest route. Just a comment.
Thank you for the comment. I'll simply state that off Island at Spanish Wells Road, there is a do not block intersection sign on the mast arm, and yes, there are potentially actions that we could take to make that sign a bit more prominent and apparent to motorists. Since the end of toll collections, the volume demand on the Cross Island Parkway is basically up about 18% if you look at the big picture, and there's been a similar decrease in demand on William Hilton Parkway. So, and that didn't happen overnight. That was something that happened gradually over the year that following the suspension of toll collections, and it continues to this day. We are still continuing to see a bit of an ongoing shift in demand off of the William Hilton Parkway onto the Cross Island Parkway. Probably all the construction that was going on there for the Cross Island Parkway here during 2022 tended to tamp down some of that demand, and now it's rebounding back.
Thank you.
Commissioner Whaley.
Question, because how is that representative of the most sort of intrusive traffic problems we have on the island? So from a layman's perspective, I don't understand that, because anecdotally, when you observe, the problems happen in July and August on weekends. And, my experience in some other disciplines say when you're building to something, I have no understanding of traffic, so I don't take this as a suggestion. I'm just trying to understand context. You build to a certain level of peak, and maybe that's where your statistics around, volume over capacity and, the delay volume numbers come in. But why are you picking midweek June when our volume of human beings on the island peaks in July and August?
Well, as outlined in the LMO, the intent of all the codified regulations that we have about counting traffic each year, analyzing it, reporting it to the commission in this report, the intent was that the results would be used to make design decisions, road decisions, where we need another turn lane, where we need to revise the traffic signal timing, etc. And immediately determined, the folks that wrote the LMO codes immediately determined that we didn't necessarily want to make design decisions based on, say, Memorial Day weekend or July the 4th weekend, or maybe even Labor Day weekend. Certainly not what we experienced last week during the golf tournament. The LMO, whereas it now says that the LMO reads that the annual counts will be conducted on a typical weekday in June, that was seen as approximating about 85th percentile demand on the island. And if you look at demand over the course of a year, you're going to see a normal distribution, a bell curve, and that 85th percentile pretty well corresponds to the side of the bell curve where the slope in the curve of demand is the steepest, meaning that it does the best job of identifying maximum demand conditions that would be considered fairly typical when you look over the course of the year. And typically there's about 15% that would be considered atypical, associated with holidays and special events, that it was not desired that we base design decisions on that. So surveys were conducted well in the past that identified a typical weekday in June as best approximating the 85th percentile demand, and statistically speaking, that does the best job of separating what would be considered typical conditions over the course of a year or even our visitor season from atypical decisions or atypical demands that we don't want to make road design decisions based on those atypical demands.
I understand that. When I look at table 6 and 7, can you just explain one little like blip here that you didn't address? You talked a lot about Squire Pope, but like if you look at the morning peak hour and even in the afternoon peak hour, there is a intersection called Gumtree Road XIP. I assume that's a Cross-Island Parkway ramps, okay? And that's when a huge blip in delay volume and not much difference in your VC ratio. What's going on there? It happens in the morning and the afternoon as opposed to it only happening in the afternoon. So what is this Gumtree Road Cross-Island Park ramp problem?
Well, the results that are reflected in tables 6 and 7 can be very heavily influenced by not only the level of demand, but where that demand is occurring. I indicated the analysis is based on 15 minutes, the highest 15-minute demand period within the peak hour. Sometimes a greater percentage of the peak hour demand occurs in that peak 15-minute demand than in others, perhaps school let out. And the results reported in both of those tables are not only very sensitive to levels of demand and the specifics associated with that demand, but also signal timing. It could be reflective of the fact that we identified some signal timing changes to make as a result of the analyses that are reflected in the report that could result in a significant change in the performance measures without a corresponding significant change in the demand. If that
No, that makes,
answers
yeah,
your
I
question.
follow that, and when I look, say again, Gumtree Road over the Cross-Tree ramps, the Cross-Island ramps, from 21 to 22, I could see, you must have done something because the delay per vehicle went down significantly. But the trend is still there, so it, again, just from a numbers perspective, it looks like, aside from Squire Pope Road, this, and I don't know anything about it, I'm just looking at the numbers, this Gumtree Road Cross-Island Parkway ramped area is another choke point? Is that what it really is, or?
It is the signal that is the most difficult to fine-tune. It's basically the one signal where virtually all movements could benefit from more green. It's very sensitive to very slight timing changes and fine-tuning. I can advise that when we did the analyses for the 2021 Traffic Monitoring and Evaluation Report, that we did identify some signal timing changes that resulted in significant improvements to the performance of that intersection. So as a result of the traffic counts and resulting analysis that was conducted in 2021, yes, we did go out late in 2021 and make some signal
I
timing
could see
changes
something must have happened.
to that intersection.
My last question, you mentioned South Forest Beach, and you mentioned the whole point of this is to feed into island design decisions, not just traffic. So I know that there's a town team working on parking at Coligny Beach. So when you were doing the counts down around that area, and people were being turned away from parking in Coligny Beach because it was overfilled and they were going somewhere else, is that increasing the crossings down there? I mean, do you know what the root cause of that increase was? Was it that there were lack of parking, or is anybody looking at that? Maybe you don't have the answer. It's just, it raises this question, why?
Yeah, I think that the that it pretty well goes without saying that when we conduct these counts on a typical weekday in June, that we have demand that approximates or exceeds the capacity of that parking lot. So my short answer to you is no. I don't think that there are any parking supply versus demand issues that resulted in that very significant increase in the crossing demand. And I'm somewhat perplexed as to the reason why we counted twice as many in June 22 versus June 21. But it may be something as, it may have something to do with the development, the town's development of the Low Country Celebration Park and more events moving down there. I
And
think
parking
that's
in
the
the
best
shopping
answer.
center and walking across, perhaps.
I think that's the best answer that I can
That's
give to
interesting.
you as to why we counted so many more folks crossing there than the previous year. I don't really have a good answer for you, but
Good as hypothesis as anything.
suffice to say that it's a very popular crossing point, and it could also be make every effort to try to conduct these counts at a time that the results are not skewed by things like road construction or inclement weather or traffic accidents that would inordinately skew the results and result in atypical numbers. But it could be something as also as subtle as when the counts were performed in June 2021, maybe it was a cloudy day, and maybe we had a real sunny day this year. The machine counts that are summarized in Table 1 are counted over the course of 72 hours and then averaged out to result to reach 24-hour average results. But the turn and movement counts on our intersections are basically all done during a single day. Go out and count it during the morning peak period and return and count it during the afternoon peak period. So it's a little bit more of a snapshot without, it does not reflect multi-day demands.
Commissioner Lobaugh has another question.
Just a comment in relation to her question about the timing. Didn't I read that there was a recommendation to move it to July?
That is
That's
currently
being
under
considered-
consideration
Okay.
by the town. I think that is an LMO amendment that is currently being considered and may well be enacted in advance of next year's counts.
Karen, can you tell me, is Commissioner Mueller participating virtually?
No, sir, we were not able to
Okay,
get
then
him.
Vice Chair O'Neill, do you have any questions or comments?
I have no comments.
So it seems like our action here is to forward this report that's received here today, either with our comments and remarks, that's something that we'd like for the town council to be aware of our concerns about, or just to forward it on that we've received it as we're required to do annually. And
I would like to move that we forward them as presented.
I'll second that.
support. Okay. Is there any public comment on this topic before we move on? Discussion among commissioners. Okay, the motion is to forward the report on to town council without any remarks on our part, and thank Darren and his staff for such a fine job doing this. All in favor of that motion, please raise your right hand. Unanimous vote, and we'll move on. Thank you. Thank you again, Darren, that was excellent. Our next item of business is to talk about the rules of procedure changes. We have been, for the last couple of meetings, been dealing with changes to the LMO. This is a 5-phase process that began a while back. We are currently in phase 3, with phases 4 and 5 still to come. But we have 2 or 3 items that were proposed at a previous meeting. We've sent staff back to take another look at them a couple times, and they're bringing back today for our action, I believe. So, Missy, would you take it from there?
Sure, except we're talking about the rules of procedure.
Sorry. Yes. Sorry,
Yeah.
rules of procedure. Thank you.
That's right. We have been talking about the rules amendment for a couple meetings now, and what was sent out both to you in advance of the meeting includes those amendments. I'll give the high-level overview. So it is, what's before you are some proposed changes to our amendment section. And it's recommended that we change it such that the Planning Commission, by majority vote at a regular meeting, can amend their rules. And then also, the next change is to our standing committees. Currently, our rules identify 5 standing committees: the Comprehensive Plan, Land Management Ordinance, Capital Improvements Program, Rules of Procedure, and Nominating Committees. And establishing and operating committees of a planning commission is not required by state law. And we had included in our memo a lot of reasons why we wanted to streamline the decision-making process, to remove those standing committees, but still allow the process to have ad hoc committees. We think it reduces some of the bureaucracy, and it enhances the transparency and accountability by having review by the Planning Commission as a whole body. It ensures equal participation, reduces costs from organizing additional meetings, facilitates better communication, and aligns more with state law. I wanted to point out as well, again, that we still allow provisions for ad hoc committees to be formed. And we also have identified in some of our conversations with the chair and the vice chair, the intent that we have to continue what would have occurred at those standing committees is to introduce topics prior to bringing them to the Planning Commission for action. So, like, for example, when the capital improvement program comes before the Planning Commission, it would come first for introduction and then second for action. When items that would have come through the Land Management Ordinance Committee, those would come to the Commission for introduction and then follow for action. So that's how we intend to still have those high-level discussions, allow opportunities for questions from the commission, and then we would have an opportunity to bring those back in time for the public hearing or the second meeting on the matter to address all those concerns before the Planning Commission is asked to take action. So next, there are some changes to the meeting schedules. The proposed amendment specifies that the schedule for regular meetings would be published in January, which is in compliance with state law. It also removes the Commission's capacity to revise or republish our meeting schedule, which is not permitted under South Carolina Code. And I wanted to point out that we do have in our code allowances to hold special meetings that can be called per Article 5, Section 1, subsection C. We also, in this amendment that's proposed, have some changes to the public comment duration. And currently our rules allow 5 minutes, and we wanted to change that to 3 minutes to be more consistent with the time allotted with other boards. And then lastly, there's a change proposed for the procedure for hearing an appeal. And there's an update to correct the citation to the municipal code section, as well as requiring that the motion by the Planning Commission for an appeal must contain conclusions of law in addition to findings of fact. So that's an overview of what's proposed here for the rules of procedure amendments. And I believe our General Counsel, Mac DeFord, is also on the meeting if you have questions.
Okay, I'm going to take Commissioner comment in reverse order this time, starting with Vice Chair O'Neill.
I think this is well presented, and we've had enough time to discuss it in several different forums, and I have no comments.
Okay. Commissioner Whaley? Oba?
I also have no comment. I think it's well prepared.
Hens?
Regarding the committees, the 5 committees that you said were going to be collapsed into just a whole, what about the Gullah Geechee Land and Cultural Preservation Task Force? Is that a committee of the Planning Commission, or is that separate?
It's a separate body. It includes some representatives from the Planning Commission, yes.
But it's not one of our 5.
Mr. D'Arienzo?
No comment.
And I haven't done either. So could I find out if there's any public comment on the changes of the rules for procedure? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to accept the changes to the LMO. Commissioner Hens? supported by Commissioner D'Arienzo.
Second?
Should be to support all of the, to approve the changes as proposed by staff. Commission discussion about that. All in favor then, please raise the right hand. It's unanimous once again. Great, thank you. It took us 3 meetings, but we got through it okay. That's great. Commission business, I have none. Chairman's report, I only have to say thank you, I guess, for the confidence in electing me chair at the first meeting that I had ever attended in 2 years. I don't know if that says anything or not, but I did have. Don't miss a meeting. I did, until you miss a meeting. I did have, but the nominating committee chair, Mr. O'Neill, did ask if it was okay to put my name in nomination, so it was not a total surprise, but I do thank you for that. I am hopeful to facilitate these meetings in a way in which everyone feels like they have all the participation they want and all the information they get to make good decisions. So look forward to working with everybody. Staff reports. Do we have any staff reports today, Shay?
Yes, sir. Sure do. You have a copy in your packet. We received 1 major subdivision application, 2 major development plan applications. The Capital Improvements Committee met and recommended approval for the Capital Improvements Program. Gullah Geechee Land and Cultural Preservation Task Force, their summary is covered there as well. They continue to move forward on the efforts for the implementation of that report. And we now have Krishana on board, so it's gained momentum. There is a link for updates to the capital improvement dashboard. If you have specific questions on any of the projects that we have, they have a very detailed and informative interactive dashboard that you can access at that link. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions from any commissioners on what Shay has just presented to us? They're all under review and will be coming back to us at some point. Is that right?
This is a report that basically covers activities that have been reviewed by the commission previously. So,
thank you.
Or the other board.
No other questions?
Yeah, the packet you referred to for the subdivisions, is that forthcoming?
I believe that the 107 Legamutton project will be coming to the commission. Chaplain Townhomes and the Holiday Inn Express. I don't believe that does come. It's a building expansion. So yes, those actual application submittals will be coming to the commission for review. They were just submitted.
Questions? Other staff reports, Shay? Any other business to come before the commission today? I'd entertain a motion for adjournment. Whaley, Commissioner D'Arienzo, all in favor? We are adjourned.